Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about George Romero's famous 1968 zombie film, Night of the Living Dead. Buckle up, folks, because I've got a lot to say about this one. And the film begins with a young woman named Barbara who accompanies her brother Johnny to visit their father's gravesite somewhere in rural Pennsylvania. Barbara is uncomfortable in the lonely cemetery, and Johnny mocks her unease, pretending to be some kind of creepy monster coming to get her. But Johnny doesn't get to laugh for very long, though, as the siblings find themselves under a genuine attack. The aggressor is a pale man in muddy, tattered clothing. Although clumsy and awkward in his movements, the man is tenaciously aggressive and seemingly immune to pain. He kills Johnny and chases Barbara, though the young woman manages to flee. Unfamiliar with the area and far from any town, Barbara is perhaps fortunate to stumble across a nearby farmhouse, but it soon becomes apparent that the building is not necessarily a safe place. She finds a bloodied and partially eaten corpse inside. Whatever caused the man to attack her in the cemetery seems to be widespread. Barbara's luck does finally seem to take a turn for the better, however, with the arrival of Ben, a sturdy and fairly level headed stranger who saves the emotionally distraught Barbara from an attack by the tattered man and several other similarly aggressive, shambling people. Warning Barbara that there'll be more of these aggressors converging on the house, Ben coaxes her to help him board the place up. If they can fortify the doors and windows, perhaps they can hold out till help arrives. Of course, that's a gamble at best, and it offers protection. It doesn't offer any protection at all from dangers that might already be inside the house. So, in the mid 1960s, George Romero and his friend Russell Streiner were making TV commercials and short special purpose films. But after producing a high budget commercial spoofing Fantastic Voyage, Romero decided the time was right to try making a feature film. His plan was to capitalize on what he saw as the film industry's thirst for the bizarre. With initial seed funds of about $12,000, they produced as much footage as they could and used that to incrementally fund more and more of the production, which ultimately rose to a total cost of about $114,000, which is just over $1 million in 2024 terms. Now, when the film finally made it to cinema, it initially encountered something of a stormy critical reception. A review in Variety magazine denounced the movie as a moral failing of the film's makers, the horror genre, and regional cinema, accusing it of being effectively pornographic due to its extreme violence. The public, meanwhile, flocked to the film in droves. It grossed more than 100 times its own budget during the first decade after its release, and it launched Romero's filmmaking career. Over the years since its release, the critical response has undergone a complete reversal. It's now regarded as a classic of the horror cinema, and it's a reputation I think the film wholly deserves. Because, in point of fact, Night of the Living Dead launched an entirely new type of horror film and fundamentally redefined the meaning of the word zombie within the cinematic world. This latter achievement was particularly notable because the film never actually uses the Z word. It always refers to its monsters as ghouls, probably because the term zombie then had a different meaning. Instead, the term zombie was retroactively applied to Night of the Living Dead's monsters after its cannibalistic undead became the dominant zombie concept in Western cinema and then more broadly in Western culture as a whole. A host of subsequent media across film, TV, books, and games owes a fundamental debt to this movie. Popular works such as The Walking Dead, World War Z, Resident Evil, Zombieland, 28 Days Later, Shaun of the Dead, and even Disney's family friendly musical comedy franchise Zombies all build on the work done here. And I haven't even mentioned yet the Night of the Living Dead's own sequels, of which there were five of steadily decreasing quality, and the many direct imitators, parodies, and homages that it spawned. The most famous of these is probably the Return of the Living Dead franchise, which racked up five films of its own from 1985 to 2005. So, why does the shadow of this film loom so large over horror media? Well, frankly, because it's really good. But let's talk about why. And the core concept of Night of the Living Dead is a simple one. A group of strangers are trapped in an isolated location by an enemy they can't hope to defeat directly, and they must try to find a way to survive. It's a simple, primal scenario, and one we see in miniature in many forms of media. The protagonist hides, quaking as enemies prowl around outside. It's a setup that speaks to us on a visceral level. None of us will ever have to worry about being eaten by the living dead, but we can all imagine the kind of fear that leads to locking or barring your doors against a lurking threat. Night of the Living Dead takes that scenario and turns it into pretty much the whole film. This is 90 minutes of a cast besieged, the situation growing ever more desperate as they struggle to survive till dawn. This is a favourite motif of our history and historiography, the heroic stand against overwhelming odds, distilled into movie length form. And make no mistake, this is a foundational story we tell ourselves, both in history, Thermopylae, Leningrad, Rorke's Drift, and in fiction, such as Boromir's Last Stand or The Siege of Gondor from Lord of the Rings, or the whole movie of The Seven Samurai. So, this is a situation that needs little explanation for us to grasp it completely. It's a part of our culture, and that's a smart way to get instant buy-in to what is, scientifically speaking, a nonsense scenario. The dead can't be living. We don't have to worry about that. And then the movie does its second smart thing, which is to stay laser focused on the scenario it has created. The script and the camera stay completely focused on what is happening here in this farmhouse as a small group of strangers try to survive and argue about how that is best achieved. Do these characters sometimes wonder what is happening in the world at large? Of course they do. Do they even hear a few broadcasts early on? Yep. Do they wonder why this is happening? Naturally, anyone would. Does the movie spend even a moment diluting its focus by showing us what is happening elsewhere, or commit any time to revealing the true story behind the undead, or have the characters undertake a quest to save the world by stopping the menace? Nope, nope, and nope again. This is a film that sets very clear stakes very early on. Will these people survive the Night of the Living Dead? And it never lets itself be distracted from those stakes. This is a personal, individual tale of life and death in the face of an implacable menace. The film is all the stronger for never wavering from that paradigm. Now, is the tight focus a product of the film's constrained resources? Quite probably, at least in part anyway. The fewer cast members and sets you deal with, the cheaper your movie is to make. Working within their financial limits was an imperative for Romero and co. What they didn't have to do was take those constraints and make them a virtue. That's smart filmmaking, and that is what they did. Now, I've already talked about how Night of the Living Dead founded a new genre within horror, but pioneering the idea of flesh eating zombies is not the only innovation here. You see, in 1968, when this came out, horror movies were generally actually a fundamentally fairly cozy genre. The good guys ultimately win, everything's okay. They might be a bit scary, but only in a safe way. And that was so much the case that the majority of the horror movie audience at the time was preteens and adolescents. In fact, when Night of the Living Dead had its national premiere a month before the introduction of the MPAA rating system, there were children as young as 8 or 9 years old in the audience. And this is not at all a film intended for that kind of age of audience. Night of the Living Dead is most definitely not a cozy, safe, it'll be all right in the end kind of movie. This is a film that fully embraces the life and death struggle that faces its characters, and it doesn't give brave and virtuous characters the kind of miraculous escapes that most media teaches us to expect them to get. This is a horror movie that doesn't shy away from the reality that good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes, which has the confidence to say, maybe horror can be scary not just in the moment, but even after you've finished watching it. Simply put, Night of the Living Dead is great stuff, and you should see it. One word of warning if you do seek it out, though. There are several versions out there. You want either the black and white 1968 original or the colorized version of that same film. You don't want the 1990 remake of the same name. It's a serviceable movie, but not of the same standard. Nor do you want the 2006 offering Night of the Living Dead 3D. And you most definitely do not want the 30th anniversary edition, which includes additional scenes and a new soundtrack. Both are awful and undermine pretty much all of the original film's impact and virtues. Fortunately, the 1968 original version is widely available as it slipped into the public domain in the United States. You can find it online with little difficulty as a result. And I mean, unless you're completely averse to horror movies, really, seek it out. It's worth it. Next time, House of the Dead. Yes, the 2003 Uwe Boll film. I love this movie, even though it is objectively awful, and I plan to talk about why. That is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you've seen Night of the Living Dead, let me know what you thought of it.